So that's his analogy. Interesting. Sorry. Allah. So, this is the last section on, and I'm going to do up to the mughalatat, because I think we have another class tomorrow, don't we? Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. So I'll do that, because I want to go over the sophistical things, because they're very important, and just give you some guidelines for those of you who haven't studied them before. The 5 skills, these are called the sina'at al-khams. The 5 skills, this is what, if you remember at the outset of our journey, I showed you some slides that had formal and material logic. What we've been doing prior to this is mostly formal logic. Now we're moving into, this is material logic. So this is the material that arguments are made up of. The formal logic deals with the form of the argument, but the material logic deals with the madda, the material. So you have surah and madda, all right? So he says, al-burhan huwa qiyasun mu'allafun min muqaddimatin yaqiniyatin li-intaj al-yaqin. Now, one of the interesting things about that is it's like a perfect definition. Because one of the best ways to give a definition is with the four ilal, the 4 causes. So what were they? What's that? Yeah, the maddiya, the material cause, the efficient cause, the formal cause, and the final cause, right? The way my mnemonic for it is MEF to the second, MEF to the second, material, efficient, formal, final. I mean, those are little things you can do to help remember things. Mauritanians do a lot of those, so I benefited from that. Anyway, if you look at this, al-burhan, now he's going to give you the definition of demonstration. هو قياس مؤلف من مقدمات يقينية للإنتاج اليقين. So, it's قياس مؤلف من مقدمات. It's a syllogism that contains muqaddimat. So the material of it is the muqaddimat. All right? That's the material. Now that is by mutabaqa. Do you remember the biltizam? Because remember we had definitions that are by correspondence, but also by iltizam. Do you remember that at the beginning of the text? And we had tadammun and iltizam, right? So tadammun, you have something like, if you say man's rational, you understand that he's an animal, right? If you say he's a rational animal, that's a correspondence, right? And then if you say that you understand by it that he has the capacity to write, right? That's bil-iltizam. So by this, the efficient cause is understood by iltizam. What would be the efficient cause in the qiyas of burhan? What would be the efficient cause? I mean, what are you reasoning with? There's only one thing you can reason with. Huh? What's that? Yeah, your aql, right? So it's the quwwa aqliya is the efficient cause here, and the material cause is the muqaddimat, right? Yaqiniya, right? And so the qiyas is the form that it takes. And then what's the illa gha'iyya? What's the final cause? Li-intaj al-yaqeen. In order to acquire certainty. So that's a perfect definition, because he has all the causes in there. Al-Burhan huwa qiyasun, that's the form. Mu'allafun min muqaddimatin yaqiniya, that's the material. Li'intaj al-yaqeen, that's the final. And it's understood that it's the intellect doing it, that's the efficient. So what he means there is demonstrative proof is done through this syllogism, which is taking premises that are certain. In other words, they're true. Because remember, we have to have clear terms, true propositions or premises, right? And valid reasoning. So he's saying that they're muqaddimatin yaqiniya, they're true proofs, and we have certainty about them. And that will lead to intaj al-yaqeen if it's done properly. Now he's going to tell us what the yaqiniyat are. All right? What the yaqiniyat are. Al-yaqiniyatu sittatu aqsam. There are 6 divisions. See the formal division. This is now he's going to divide the different types of certainty that we have. All right? So the first is awwaliyat. قولنا الواحد نصف الاثنين والكل أعظم من الجزء. The first one are, these are postulates. They're what Kant would term a priori, as opposed to a posteriori. Things that are known. A priori means that you don't have to reason them out. They're self-evident truths. A self-evident truth is one the opposite of which is inconceivable. That's the meaning of a self-evident truth, is that you cannot conceive of the opposite being true. So when we say the whole is greater than the part, nobody could conceive of a part being greater than the whole. All right? So that's self-evident. That's a postulate. You don't prove that. It's self-evident. It needs no proof. And that's the foundation of a type of certainty. It's very important. Or else we would fall into what's called dawr and tasalsul, which is this circular reasoning and infinite regress. If everything needed to be proved, if you had to prove that the whole is greater than the part, you'll end up in circular reasoning. You can't prove it. Why is the whole greater than the part? Because the whole is greater than the part. You can't, it's a self-evident truth. Foundation of knowledge. One mushahadat. This is another type of certainty, is what we witness, our experience. So experience is a type of certainty. Now obviously it can be tricky, but generally our experience, you could experience it cold, and it's because you've got a fever. So our senses can play tricks on us. It appears that the sun is rising in the east. There's a lot of evidence that it's actually the earth that's turning. Although Stephen Hawking in his last book admitted that they're both equally valid perspectives. I mean, people, the whole Copernican thing, the revolution, like everything that went before it, they were just idiots. And he admits that. And people at the highest levels in science recognize, even though there's a lot of evidence now with the satellites, and even the way they launch satellites are based on the movement of the earth, things like that. But still, it's relative. Because if you were on the sun, what would be happening? What's that? Well, you'd be burned, yeah. But say you had a suit that enabled you to be on the sun without getting burnt. All right, so you've landed your spacecraft on the sun. You've got your heat resistant, it's air conditioning inside. It's nice, 85 degrees. You're comfortable. You walk out on the sun and you see the earth. What's that? Huh? Exactly. We would see, and from that perspective as well, from the same science, it's the sun going around the earth, right? So, mushahadat are problematic, but they are a type of certainty, right? I mean, if I see, if I see you in front of me, I'm going to assume that, like, I'm really seeing you. You're there. That's a type of certainty. Now, obviously, an angel could have taken your form. That's possible. Ibn Mubarak was on his way to Hajj, and he met a family that was completely bereft. So he gave all his money to them. He went back to Iraq. And when some people from Iraq who knew him got back, they said, it was so nice to see you at Arafah. He said, I wasn't at Arafah. No, you were at Arafah. We all saw you. We had a conversation. And don't you remember? He said, I didn't make Hajj. He said, no, you said you were making Hajj. I said, I didn't make Hajj. So he had a dream that night, and he was told that Allah was so pleased with his charity that he had an angel in his form make the Hajj for him. So, like I said, the mushahadat, you might see somebody, and it could be an angel in that person's form. Wallahu alam. So, but generally the mushahadat are a source of certainty. I mean, I'm certain that I'm in Kunya. I know I'm not in Berkeley. All right? Definitely. I know that. Okay. Just trust me. It's a freak show. I would know. Just, I haven't seen any freaks since I've gotten here. So. I mean, it's like, it's amazing. It really is. Like purple hair and just everything going on. Yeah. So. But I would know if I was in Berkeley, and I would know if I was in California, right? Unless I was delusional or something. But I know I'm in Kunya. I know that I visited the Masjid Jami' al-Salim, right? These are all experiences. I can't deny my senses of what I've experienced. So that's very important. Perceived senses, mushahadat. Like our statement, the sun is shining, the fire is burning. Those are things that we can ascertain through mushahadat. And then the third you have, and then the third you have empirical premises, mujarrabat. Like our statement, scamony, that should be scamony, is a laxative of yellow bile. I mean, this is from tibb, Unani medicine, old medicine that was practiced. Like Hamdard, if you're from Pakistan, you know the Hamdard brothers. Like Ruh Hafsa, right? Yeah. What, don't they use that for like, yeah. So they would know that. They probably make that, scamony. And yellow bile is one of the 4 akhlat. You have 4 humors in Galen's Hippocrates. Galen developed this theory, and then Ibn Sina added to it the psychological dimension. He added the personality types, the 4 personality types, which is pretty much a Briggs-Meyer classification, so he was pretty accurate. But anyway, that's an example from the 9th century. So, and that's basically like penicillin. You know, we one day that Swiss scientist, was it Fleming? Was he English? It was Fleming, huh? Who discovered penicillin? Fleming? Was he working in Switzerland? He's English, right? Yeah, English. We should know these things, yeah. Because, I mean, he's saved more lives than, it's amazing. But anyway, he had some Petri dishes, and there were bacteria, and there was no bacteria around this mold, right? So that was he replicated that experiment over and over again. And from that came penicillin. So that was tajriba. That was through tajriba. And most of our medicine and science is from this. People ate mushrooms and died. And the next group said, I'm not going to eat those. You know. Right? That's a lot of how we learn things, was just through experiment. Children learn that, true. They touch fire and then they know. Don't touch the fire again. But they don't know things at first, right? They have to learn those. And you'll notice around 2, your children will start getting into they'll have a lot of falls and things like this. Is their coming into their body, because they begin to learn about limitations that they weren't aware of before. So that's all empirical. And then you have the hadsiyat, which are conjectural premises. That actually in Western, it's actually intuition, the hadsiyat, intuitive. It's something you intuit. This is different from the empirical or the mushahadat, because people ate mushrooms and died, and the next group said, I'm not going to eat those, right? That's a lot of how we learn things, was just through experiment. Children learn that, true. They touch fire and then they know, don't touch the fire again. But they don't know things at first, right? They have to learn those. And you'll notice around 2, your children will start getting into they'll have a lot of falls and things like this. Is their coming into their body, because they begin to learn about limitations that they weren't aware of before. So that's all empirical. And then you have the hadsiyat, which are conjectural premises. That actually in Western, it's actually intuition, the hadsiyat, intuitive. It's something you intuit. This is different from the empirical or the mushahadat, because with the mushahadat, it's immediate, right? There's an immediate understanding. With the conjecture, with the hadsiyat, people noticed certain things. Like they noticed that the moon's color differs based on its distance from the sun. They also noticed that when the sun and the moon had a conjunction, the light disappeared from the moon, right? Or when the earth came between the sun and the moon, the light went out. So intuitively they understood. They didn't really have any proofs because they couldn't see it, but they intuited that this is what was happening. So that's a hadsiyat. It's a type of certainty. And then the mutawatirat, he calls them uninterrupted premises. I would call them historical facts. The mutawatirat are when so many people have testified to something, it becomes impossible to deny it if you're sane. And this is important because this is one of the foundations of human knowledge, the mutawatirat. I wrote an article about how Holocaust denial undermined Islam. And my premise in that article, and I actually spoke with Khalid Blankenship, who I really trust, and Khalid knows more about history than anybody I've ever met. He's a professor at Philadelphia, in Philadelphia at Temple University, but really brilliant man, and phenomenal knowledge of human history, with a specialization on, he did his PhD on the collapse of the Umayyad, which he argues that it imploded from within. There wasn't any, just expanded too rapidly, too quickly, and couldn't sustain it. But, I asked him, it was at a time when I think, one of the Muslim leaders had called the Holocaust into question. There's a lot of people that question the Holocaust. But, I called him up and I said, listen, do you think it's acceptable to argue that the Holocaust is mutawatir? In other words, there's so many people that witnessed it, that the idea that they all collaborated to concoct this story, this false story, is impossible to believe. And he said, absolutely. I would consider it mutawatir as a historian. You know, the numbers are debatable. And that's where a lot of the problem arises. You know, they settled on 6 million, but the numbers were debatable. But he actually thought that 6 million was not far-fetched. He said it's between 4 and 8. But it was just hard to tell because they didn't have the type of census that they would have needed to have. In any case, that's a mutawatir is when so many people have argued this thing. Or have said that it happened. So we know that in 1066, right, what happened? I mean, lots of things happened. But what big thing happened for Western people? Yeah, right? William the Conqueror. Normans invaded England. So that's something that if you deny it, you're denying reality, really. Because there's just too many. I mean, the example they use in books of epistemology is, and no offense to the Australians, is that Australia, that it's impossible to believe that there was a conspiracy by cartographers and others, that Australia really doesn't exist and that it was completely made up. Nobody would believe that in their right mind. But you would be amazed. There's a Hindu PhD, he has a legitimate PhD, who wrote a book arguing that it was the Hindus that built the Taj Mahal and not the Muslims. And you can go online and see there's a whole website dedicated to this argument that the Taj Mahal is actually a Hindu temple and not a Muslim temple. So we have people out there that will deny reality. And this is one of the big problems in communication and in trying to convince people of things, is that you're dealing with a lot of nutcases. And nutcases can have PhDs. In fact, there's a considerable number, I think, do. So that makes it more problematic because they've been legitimized by institutions that say that this person is, you know, a scholar in whatever field he's been given that PhD in, and that he's also a first-class researcher, because that's essentially the PhD is teaching people how to become first-class researchers. So anyway, we know that the Prophet Muhammad SAW claimed prophecy, and we know he performed miracles, because those are mutawatir reports. And so this argument that, you know what I find really interesting about Orientalists, if you read like the Encyclopedia of Islam, whenever there's a really nice hadith, they'll say, this is clearly fabricated, or this is obviously hagiographical, or, you know, they'll make these arguments. And then if there's any hadith that will put any bad light on the Muslims or on the Prophet ﷺ, they'll just state it as historical fact. Like the age of Aisha, it's just historical fact. They don't accept the hadiths of the palm tree that moaned, obviously made up. They don't accept the hadiths, you know, all these amazing hadiths, the splitting of the moon, obviously made up, even though the Quran clearly states it. None of the Quraysh denied it. There's no denial of it. It was mutawatir. It was experienced mutawatir. In fact, they said sihrun muntashir because they went out and asked the people around Mecca if they saw it too. Now, whatever that was, if it was split moon phenomenon, like Imaduddin, the astronomer, suggests, there is a astronomical event called split moon phenomenon, you know, and that it could have been that, or it could have been the physical splitting, which is what obviously most scholars argue, but that something happened in Mecca on that day when the Prophet pointed to the moon, and the moon appeared to split in two to the people of Mecca. That's mutawatir. Li'ilafi Quraysh. That's mutawatir. There were many people alive when that surah was revealed. The people of Mecca saw birds come and pelt the army of Abraha and killed many of the soldiers and the elephants, and they fled back to Ethiopia. They saw that. And after that, the Arabs called the Quraysh Ahlullah, the people of God. They didn't mess with them. They were afraid of them, seriously. That's mutawatir. It's as sound and true as 1066. Because if you're going to accept the same criteria for 1066, then you have to accept the criteria for these things as well. There are miracles of the Prophet that are not mutawatir. Many of them are not mutawatir, but there are certain ones that are mutawatir. They're historical fact. The moaning of the palm tree is a historical fact. The splitting of the moon is a historical fact. It's not fantasy. So, the Arabs say, "Ba'ukum tajurru wa ba'una la tajur." The rules of grammar work for your words, but you're not letting them work for our words. It's like you have a different set of criteria when you deal with Muslims than when you deal with your own tradition. And then finally, instinctive premises. These are qadaya ma'a qiyasatiha. These are instinctive premises whose syllogisms are implicitly present, like our statement 4 is even. So this is different from the first one, the a priori, the awwaliyat. This is different. So the hadsiyat. So he says mujarrabat كقولنا شرب السقمونية يسهل الصفراء وحدسيات كقولنا نور القمر مستفاد من نور الشمس ومتواترات كقولنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ادعى النبوة وأظهر المعجزة وقضايا قياساتها معها كقولنا أربعة زوج بسبب وسط حاضر في الذهن والانقسام بمتساويين. So the reason that is true is because of the two, that there's an intermediary that is present in the mind. So in other words, you don't have to go through the normal qiyas. It's already present in the mind. So it's different from an a priori in that there is a type of mediated understanding, but the mediated understanding already is present in the mind. It doesn't have to come from a syllogism, an argument. It's already there. So when we say 4 is even, the intermediary that's present in the mind is the division into 2 equal parts. So we understand what 2 equal parts is when we say even. So 4 is right, divided into 2 twos, 2 equal parts. 6 is divided into 2 threes, right, like that. So that's something that is, these are the qadaya, that the qiyasatuha ma'aha, that the syllogism is already present. It doesn't need to be expressed. Now, in terms of the yaqeen, it's important to understand, our scholars have divided the different types of knowing into yaqeen, dhann, shak, waham, and taqleed. Jahl murakkab and taqleed. So the first one, yaqeen, right, is i'tiqadun jazimun. It's an absolute firm belief in the mind of the one who believes it, and it's mutabiqun lil waqi'. It corresponds with reality. That's yaqeen. It corresponds with reality. So if you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists with certainty in your heart, you're jazm about it, I have no doubts that God exists, that is yaqeen if it's mutabiqun lil waqi'. If it's not mutabiqun lil waqi', then it's called jahl murakkab. It's compounded ignorance. So when the thing does not correspond with reality, it's called compounded ignorance, because ignorance is divided into simple and compound. Simple ignorance is when you don't know something and you know you don't know it. That's called simple ignorance. Jahilun basit. So jahilun basitun is somebody who knows they're ignorant. Jahilun murakkabun is somebody who is ignorant but they think they know. And all of our scholars they're almost in agreement that you can't do anything with that person. because they're convinced that what they know is true, and they're not open to other possibilities. So that's yaqeen, is when it corresponds with reality. Dhann is when you have preponderance of weight or evidence is on the side of yaqeen. So if you look at yaqeen is on one side, certainty, and on the other side, right, is improbability, right? In the middle there is doubt. Doubt is when you can't decide whether it's true or not true, whether it's sound or it's unsound. You just, the jury's out. Moot point. I don't know. That's shak. One is when you think it's true. So, did Zayd arrive? He might have, he might not, I don't know. That's shak. If you say, I'm certain he arrived because I just saw him, that's yaqeen. And that's ayn al-yaqeen. Right? And then the person you're telling, if he trusts you, it's ilm al-yaqeen. Right? It's a type of certain knowledge. And then you have waham, which is on the other side of yaqeen, which is like, it just has no basis. All right? Now, if the person if they believe, but they don't, and they have an i'tiqad, jazm about it, but it's possible for that to be removed. In other words, somebody could put doubt into their mind, right? That person is muqqalid. And that's why in Aqidah, most of the ulama argued that you could not be muqqalid. You could be muqqalid in fiqh, but you couldn't be muqqalid in Aqidah. That you really had to be certain about things for yourself. And so, that's very important to know that you know, that taqleed is madhmoom in our tradition. And that's why those who argue against taqleed, they're right. Taqleed is not a good state to be in. But this argument that you have to be a mujtahid without the conditions of ijtihad is insanity. So these people that think they can go to the book and the sunnah and not make taqleed of the imams, those people it's crazy. The whole idea is crazy. Because they don't have the tools to do that. If they did, then they have to. And those tools are important to acquire. And everybody who's capable, who has the time, the leisure time, and the ability, they should try to acquire those tools of ijtihad. But very few people have done it in history. And for those of us who have not acquired them, we're obliged to follow those who did acquire them. But to say, no, I'm taking from the book and the sunnah, well, you're going to be on a new religion every day. Because there's over 50,000 hadiths. Many of them outwardly appear to be in contradiction. Not many of them, but a lot. Enough of them to be problematic. And there are verses also that appear to be in contradiction. But the mujtahidun have resolved those in both the Quran and the Hadith. And those are the people that we follow. So if we try to just go directly to the Quran and the Hadith without recourse to these people, we fall into a type of compounded ignorance, which is very dangerous. And Imam al-Aqani says, وَكُلُّ مَنْ قَلَّدَ فِي التَّوْحِيدِ إِيمَانُهُ لَمْ يَخْلُ مِنْ تَرْدِيدِ. You know, that everyone who has taqleed in his iman, that his iman is not free of wavering, that he could waver in it. So, that's important. And then he says that Imam al-Subki says, إِن لَمْ يَجْزِمْ بِقَوْلِ الْغَيْرِ كَفَى وَإِلَّا لَمْ يَزَلْ فِي الضَّيْرِ. That if you are certain and the person that you were making taqleed of, he loses his faith, but that doesn't cause you to lose your faith, then that's sound taqleed. So that's like a criterion that Imam al-Subki argued. So then, now so is everybody clear about that, those categories? Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So could we as students be okay with having taqleed for now?
Yeah, no, you have to. We're all muqallidun. I'm a muqallid, you're a muqallid. We're muqallidun. In aqidah, you should not be muqallid. Like, I don't consider myself muqallid in aqidah. Other than, I have taqleed of the school that I follow. I'm Maliki, and my inclination is towards a non-ta'wili Ash'ari position. So that's where I am. That's what I was taught. It makes the most sense to me. But it's not taqleed in that I learned the barahin like I know why I believe what I believe, and then I know the arguments of why you should believe in God. I learned the Kalam cosmological argument. I learned the proofs, the adillah that are rational proofs and revelatory proofs. So in that way, it's good to learn a text in aqidah so that you can get out of taqleed in aqidah and you have certainty about your faith, of why you believe it. In fiqh, there's some masail that I feel like I know the adillah, I know how they got them, but the mujtahid is the one who knows he can do it with all the rulings of the deen. So there's mujtahidun in masail. Like for instance, in the moon verse, I studied a lot of different opinions. I read all the different opinions. I went through all the different opinions, and then I came up with my argument for what I thought was the soundest opinion. And I wrote that in a book called Caesarean Moonbursts. So that's an example where I took a mas'ala and I really tried to understand it to the best of my ability, and then to make an argument for why I thought that was a preferred argument. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, in the next couple qawaid, he'll talk about khilaf and ikhtilaf, so you can understand how that differs. So al-jadr huwa qiyasun. Okay, now another one is wal-jadru huwa qiyasun. So now we're moving into, that was burhan and how we prove burhan. Now we're moving into dialectic. So disputation. وَالْجَدْرُ هُوَ قِيَاسٌ مُؤَلَّفٌ مِنْ مُقَدِّمَاتٍ مَشْهُورَةٍ. Some of them say that should not say la musallamatin. That should say musallamatin. So nix that la. I don't know where he got that. Maybe that's in the sharh. Is Omar here? Let me check that before you nix that letter. But the mashhura, my understanding of it is it's musallama and an-nas. In other words, they're agreed upon amongst people. That's what it means. But let me just check that. But that's my understanding of it. They're not yaqiniya, like to say al-adlu hasanun wa dhulmu qabihun. Those are musallamat and an-nas, right? Like if we're debating and I say to you, do you accept that al-adlu hasan wa dhulmu qabih? Do you accept that justice is good and injustice is bad? And you say yes. Then we say that's musallama. Okay, so that now we can move to the next. So I can argue the next thing. Do you accept that? Do you accept the Pope's argument that the Iraqi war that the Americans led against the Iraqis was unjust? Right? And you say yes. And then we can say, okay, therefore, the war against the Iraqis, right, was wrong because injustice is wrong. You agreed with that. And you agreed that the Pope's argument for a just war was not fulfilled in the American aggression against the Iraqis. Therefore, you accept that the Iraqi war was not only unjust but wrong. That's a way of jadal. That's how we would do jadal. What's that?
I think because of this contradiction between the two, either yes, either no, it's la musallama. It's jadal. Jadal means la musallama.
Yeah, between the two, but it's based on قياس مؤلف من مقدمات مشهورة لا مسألة عندنا. صحيح, you're right. So it's not, yeah, it's لا مسلمة عند الخصمين. So I'm wrong there. But the mashhura is using what is agreed on. In terms of the qiyas, there's a debate going on. Yeah. My mistake. Apologize for ruining your text if you erased it. Those things are known through, like, what they call maslaha amma, general things that are generally good, common weal, things that we agree on. Like safe streets are a good thing. That's something that we can agree on. And then also things that relate to decent human feelings, like taking care of the underprivileged, helping the handicapped. Those are things that these are arguments that we can make that people will tend to recognize. And then also things for protection, like the hijab would be an example of that. It's for himya, lihimya, that it's a way of protecting the honor or dignity, because in many societies women are accosted or they're, to use a slang term, hit on, if they're not, if they don't let people know that. And then for customs or norms. So for instance, if you're in India, many people agree, it's a muqaddima, mashhura amongst them, that to eat animals is wrong, or amongst certain Buddhists and things like that, right? So that would be urf. That would go under the ada of the people. And then والخطابة هي قياس مؤلف من مقدمات مقبولة من شخص معتقد فيه أو مظنون. So oration or oratory, khataba, is a syllogism composed of either premises that are accepted from someone trustworthy or of presumed premises. So in khataba, people, it's a type of you're arguing, right? Here it's reasoning. مؤلف من مقدمات مقبولة من شخص. So the oratory is based on the ethos of the one speaking. So if people trust them, they're going to listen to them and they'll tend to incline towards their arguments. And this is very common in politics, right? So it must be true because Ron Paul said it, or whoever your politician of choice is. must be true because he doesn't lie. So that's the type of power that those happen. والشعر هو قياس مؤلف من مقدمات تنبسط منها النفس أو تنقبض. And then finally, shi'r, he's translating here as provocation, but it's poetic argumentation. It's using very common in imaginative literature, right? So you can make arguments. Shakespeare is a moral ethicist. He's teaching through negative examples, but his imaginative literature is not just there for entertainment, that there's actually moral edification going on. Dostoevsky, if you read Brothers Karamazov, is a good example of a novel that is making moral arguments. You know, these debates, if you look at Alyosha and Ivan and the debates between them about the world and the nature of good and nihilism, and, you know, his argument about children being punished in the world is his kind of proof that how could there be a God if you have a world where children suffer. So these are examples where poetry is used because it evokes certain things in the self. And it's very powerful because you can use it to build people up, break them down. The Arabs were very good at that. Hijat was a very common technique of the Arabs, type of poetry that really, it's very devastatingly biting, sarcastic poetry about people. And so syllogism composed of premises by which the soul is either expanded or constricted. And then I'm going to stop there because tomorrow will be the last class, and I'm going to go into the mughalatat, or the logical fallacies, and give you some. All right? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك